Welcome to the cross in the desert, speaking hope and freedom to Iran. I'm your host, Randy L. Noble, so very glad that you could be with me on this evening's program. I have a very special tribute this evening to two amazing, courageous ladies, Naghmeh Abedini and Nazanin Afshin-Jam, and I call them two prophetic voices for human rights and freedom. You know, in the world that we live in today, it's very, very dangerous to be a Christian. And we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. But what I want to do is begin to show you some visuals, some pictures of the first lady I would like to pay tribute to, Nazanin Afshin-Jam. And these are several photographs that I want you to see. The first one is a visual, get it up close, of Nazanin at a rally in 2008, speaking out against Ahmadinejad and the Iranian regime for their brutal violations of human rights, the way they treat their citizens. And this is about unjust child executions, children being executed under the age of 18 for various crimes that didn't even deserve the death penalty. And Nazanin stood up against this whole situation with a huge protest rally in 2008. And this again is another picture of Nazanin. If you look closely at this picture, you'll see a photograph of some executions by hanging in Iran. And there she is standing up for the rights of these people that were unjustly executed. In 2012, she became the wife of Peter MacKay in Canada, and that's where she presently resides. And there's a good wedding picture of the happy couple together. And this is another picture of Nazanin speaking out at a women's rights conference. You can get a close-up of this beautiful, beautiful young lady. And this is a picture of Nazanin holding her book, A Tale of Two Nazanins. And it's a very, very interesting book. We're going to talk about that in just a few moments. Well, why is it that I say about Nazanin Afshin-Jam that she is one prophetic voice for human rights? Well, let's find a little bit out about Nazanin. And she was born on April 11th, 1979 in Tehran, Iran, and is an Iranian-Canadian model. She's a singer, songwriter, author, public speaker, and human rights activist. She was a former Miss World Canada in 2003 and Miss World first runner-up, and has been an advocate for human rights in her role as president and co-founder of Stop Child Executions. She immigrated to Canada with her family in 1981. That's just a couple of years after the Iranian Revolution. And she, of course, is the wife of Peter MacKay, Canada's Minister of Justice. One of the outstanding things about Nazanin, besides being president of Stop Child Executions, is she received an email a few years ago. And, of course, being opposed to the death penalty, she received this email from a lady named Nazanin Mahababad Fatahi. And this lady, Nazanin, the other Nazanin, was sentenced to hang in Iran for stabbing one of the three men who tried to rape her and her niece in Karaj in March of 2005. So here's a woman that stabbed a man trying to rape her, and she herself became the victim, and she was put on death row. So Nazanin got this email that really revolutionized her life, and she started a campaign on behalf of the other Nazanin to save the life of this minor. And she began a petition attracting over 350,000 signatures worldwide. She wrote a song and dedicated her song, Someday the Revolution Song, to the youth of Iran. And eventually, with all of her hard work behind the scenes, raising bail money, contacting lawyers, getting out and speaking publicly, getting petitions out, the pressure was that great that Nazanin Fatia was granted a new trial by the head of judiciary in June of 2006, and in January of the very next year, Nazanin was exonerated of these murder charges and was released on January 31st, 2007. Now, for her efforts in helping this young woman be set free from this horrible murder charge, Nazanin was awarded the Hero for Human Rights Award, the Youth for Human Rights International, and Artist for Human Rights at the United Nations headquarters in New York. She is an amazing lady. She is one that we can look to as someone who stands up for the rights of those that can't be a voice for themselves. You know, the situation in Iran is very desperate. They need a voice. And Nazanin answered the call. And she also wrote a very important book about this whole story, A Tale of Two Nazanins. In the future, I hope to have Nazanin Afshin-Jam as a guest on my Blog Talk radio show, The Cross in the Desert. I have so much to ask this amazing lady who is one prophetic voice for religious freedom and human rights in the world. I want to also now turn our attention to another amazing lady who is a prophetic voice for human rights and religious freedom in the world. And I'm talking about Naghmeh Abedini. Naghmeh Abedini is pictured here, this beautiful Iranian woman also. And just a year or so ago, her husband Saeed Abedini headed to Iran and to work on an orphanage, help build an orphanage. And in the summer of 2012, he was arrested by the Revolutionary Guard and sent to Evin prison in January of 2013. He was just recently transferred from Evin prison to another prison in Karaj, Iran, which is a very desperate situation for him, where he's housed with criminals on death row who threaten his life every day. Well, Naghmeh Abedini is a prophetic voice for religious freedom and human rights in this picture. She's also in this picture here testifying at Capitol Hill before Congress about the plight for her husband Saeed Abedini. She has worked tirelessly behind the scenes, appearing on major media interviews. She was even at the United Nations conference in Geneva this past June of 2013 and speaking in behalf of her husband and giving a presentation of the gospel while she was there. And she's just an amazing lady. Here is another picture of her here. And this is her with Donald Trump and Tiffany Barons just this past winter. They got together. Donald Trump is very interested in Nazanin's plight for her husband Saeed and has pledged to work and help her with this situation. Another picture here. This is a very intimate one. A picture of Naghmeh at the prayer rally for Saeed Abedini this past September 26. A very successful prayer rally. Garnered a lot of attention for her husband Saeed in Iran. And what I want to do is talk a little bit about Naghmeh, as I've talked about Nazanin. Just recently, Naghmeh has pledged to go to Washington on March the 8th. The reason she wants to go there is to participate in something called the Hebrews 13:3 project. This is a project spearheaded by Patrick Mahoney. Patrick Mahoney has pledged his support to speak out for Saeed and all persecuted Christians by gathering at the White House in the no demonstration zone where you can be arrested in order to make the issue of Saeed front page news every day. You see, back in December, Naghmeh appeared before Congress once again, testifying at a committee, and she said, "I feel I have been abandoned by my government." What she means is, there was a deal with Iran that actually tomorrow takes effect. The United States, John Kerry, met with Iran in the Geneva meetings back, I believe it was October, November, and has reached a deal with Iran for nuclear talks, some kind of deal that means there will be some monitoring of Iranian nuclear activities, but there is no cessation of their nuclear program. They can still enrich with uranium in a few months. They're just under monitor and surveillance. At this important meeting, nothing whatsoever was mentioned about Saeed. No precondition was mentioned that Saeed needs to be released before the United States sits down and seriously talks with Iran about the nuclear situation. Instead, there was a deal for nuclear rights, if you will. Iran got off with a lessening of the sanctions, and the issue of Saeed Abedini and human rights was completely ignored. Well, this was a crushing blow to Naghmeh and the American Center for Law and Justice. And so she said, "I feel abandoned by my government." And she said in a recent status on Facebook, "I have made the decision to be arrested in front of the White House on March 8th because of my love for my husband, because there is not one stone I would not leave unturned to secure his release. I knew in my heart that this decision did not come out of rebellion against my government, or hatred, or disobedience, but it came out of love for my husband and persecuted Christians. That it came out of love for those who are in chains because of their faith in Jesus Christ. And so Naghmeh is going to go to the White House, and she's asking for many of her Facebook friends to join her there. And even if they don't feel completely satisfied about being arrested, just to be there to protest, to stand up, and to pray and support her is what she's asking. On March 8th, it's called the Joel Call. It's a prophetic witness against the violation of human rights of persecuted Christians all over the world, and especially her husband, who is still a prisoner of Iran. This is an amazing woman, a prophetic voice, and this is why I call this program Two Prophetic Voices, Naghmeh and Nazanin. When I thought tonight about Naghmeh and Nazanin, I thought tonight about Deborah. She was a judge in Israel during one of the most spiritually decadent times for the nation of Israel. Israel was under Canaanite bondage for many, many years, and it seems like none of the men judges could rise up and create a spiritual standard and stand up against the oppression of the Canaanites. But Deborah was called by God to stand up to be a prophetess, a warrior, and a judge at the time of spiritual decadence in Israel. And she rallied the support of the general there, Barak, who went out and led 10,000 Israelites against Caesarea's 100,000 iron chariots and soldiers. And in an act of judgment by God and favor by God, Deborah won. And Caesarea was later killed by Jael, who went in with a tent peg and a hammer and rammed it through Caesarea's brain in his temple. An amazing story of Deborah, a woman prophetess, warrior, and judge. And when I think of Nazanin Afshin-Jam and Naghmeh Abedini, I am reminded of Israel's great triumph because of one strong, courageous woman named Deborah. And Deborah stands as a symbol of a prophetic witness against spiritual decadence, against oppression. And when I think of Deborah, I think of Naghmeh, and I also think of Nazanin. They truly are two prophetic voices in a time of spiritual decline, in a time where the government has deserted us and abandoned us and has not sided with us to do all they can do and to muster up support and speak against Iran for the release of Saeed. And so I believe God in his providence has raised up many, many human rights activists, and two of those that come to mind tonight, Nazanin and Naghmeh, a real prophetic voice for religious freedom and human rights. I want to thank you so much for joining me on this special tribute to Nazanin and Naghmeh. And if you're interested in being a voice of hope and freedom for Iran, please come to my Facebook page, Randy L. Noble, and friend request me. I'll be glad to be your friend. There are postings and issues about the nation of Iran that God has called me to be a voice for. You can come to my Facebook page, look at my books. I'll be happy to send them to you free of charge. My hope and dream is to make a difference in the life of my friends in Iran who suffer oppression and fear every day from a government that is a dictator for their lives. So please join me, please, tonight in praying for two things. Praying for Saeed Abedini's release from Iranian prison. You can do that by going to BeHeardProject.com and signing the petition for his release. Please help me in doing this as we pray and speak for hope and freedom in the nation of Iran. God bless you. Thank you so much for joining me on the Cross in the Desert. I will see you very soon once again. Have an incredible week. Good night.